The rain hammered against the stone walls of Windsor Castle like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside the East Corridor, James Mitchell stood perfectly still. His boots were polished to a mirror shine. His uniform was pressed without a single wrinkle. But his hands were shaking. He had been a royal guard for 11 years. He had stood beside kings and queens. He had protected visiting presidents and prime ministers. But today was different. Today, something felt wrong. The radio on his belt crackled. All units remain alert. Weather conditions severe. Stay at your posts. James pressed his earpiece closer. Through the tall windows, he could see the storm growing worse. The sky was dark gray, almost black. Tree branches bent and twisted in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. He checked his watch. 3:47 in the afternoon. The young prince would be returning from his piano lesson any moment now. James had been assigned to this corridor specifically because Prince George walked through it every Tuesday and Thursday. The boy was only 10 years old, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that impressed everyone who met him. Before we continue with what happened next, if you love true stories that touch your heart, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens in the minutes ahead. James heard footsteps. Light. Quick. A child's footsteps. He straightened his posture and looked down the long hallway. Prince George appeared around the corner, his music books tucked under one arm. Behind him walked Mrs. Patterson, his tutor, a kind woman in her 60s with silver hair and gentle eyes. "Good afternoon, Officer Mitchell," the prince said politely as he approached.
"Good afternoon."
"Your Royal Highness," James replied with a small bow of his head. That's when it happened. A sound. Sharp, loud, like metal snapping. It came from above them. James looked up just as a massive iron chandelier began to fall. The storm had loosened something in the old ceiling. Centuries-old bolts were giving way. Time seemed to slow down. The chandelier was falling directly toward Prince George. Mrs. Patterson screamed. James didn't think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. He lunged forward, grabbing the boy around the waist. With all his strength, he threw himself and the prince to the side. They hit the floor hard. The breath knocked out of both of them. The chandelier crashed down exactly where Prince George had been standing 1 second earlier. Glass exploded everywhere. Metal screeched against stone. The sound echoed through the corridor like a bomb had gone off. For a moment, there was only silence. Then dust began to settle. Pieces of crystal lay scattered across the floor like diamonds. The chandelier, a priceless piece of history, was destroyed. But the boy was safe. James felt something warm on his arm. Blood. A piece of glass had cut through his uniform. But he barely noticed. His only thought was the child beneath him. "Your Highness," he whispered. "Are you hurt?" Prince George looked up at him with wide blue eyes. Prince George stared at the guard who had just saved his life. His face was pale. His hands were trembling, but he wasn't crying. He took a breath and nodded slowly. "I'm okay," he said quietly. "I think I'm okay." James carefully helped the boy to his feet. He checked him over quickly, looking for any cuts or injuries. There were none. Not even a scratch. The prince's jacket had a tear in it, but his skin was untouched. It was a miracle. Mrs. Patterson rushed over, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, oh my God." She pulled the prince into a tight hug. "You could have been killed." The radio on James's belt exploded with voices. Other guards had heard the crash. They were running toward the corridor from every direction. Within seconds, 6 more officers appeared, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for threats. "Stand down," James said firmly. "It was an accident. The chandelier fell. The prince is safe." The head of security, Commander Williams, arrived moments later. He was a tall man with gray hair and a scar across his chin. He looked at the destroyed chandelier, then at James, then at Prince George. His face went white. "Get the prince to the medical wing." "Now," he ordered, and someone notified their majesties immediately. Two guards gently guided Prince George and Mrs. Patterson down the corridor. The boy looked back over his shoulder at James one more time before disappearing around the corner. There was something in his eyes. Something James couldn't quite read. Commander Williams turned to James. "Your arm is bleeding." The cut was deeper than he'd thought. Blood was soaking through his uniform sleeve, but he barely felt the pain. The adrenaline was still pumping through his veins. "I'm fine, sir," he said. "You're going to the medical wing, too." "That's an order." The commander's voice was stern, but his eyes showed something else. Respect. "What you just did, Mitchell. You saved the heir to the throne. Do you understand that?" James hadn't thought about it that way. In that moment, he hadn't seen a prince. He had only seen a child in danger. A boy who needed help. He would have done the same for anyone. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," Commander Williams said quietly. "You did much more than that." In the medical wing, a doctor stitched up James's arm. 12 stitches. The cut had been clean but deep. While the doctor worked, James sat in silence. His mind kept replaying the moment. The sound of the chandelier falling, the weight of the boy in his arms, how close it had been. If he had been 1 second slower, ... He pushed the thought away. Down the hall, he could hear voices. The king and queen had arrived. They were with Prince George now. James could hear the queen crying. The sound made his chest tight. An hour later, Commander Williams returned. "The king and queen want to see you," and James felt his stomach drop. "Sir, come with me." They walked through the castle's private corridors. James had never been in this section before. The walls were lined with portraits of kings and queens from centuries past. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him as he walked. They stopped outside a set of large wooden doors. Commander Williams knocked twice, then pushed them open. Inside was a sitting room. Elegant, but warm. A fire crackled in the fireplace. And there, sitting on a cream-colored sofa, were the King and Queen of England. Prince George sat between them. James had been trained for many things. He knew how to handle weapons. He knew emergency protocols. He knew how to stay calm under pressure. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The king stood up. He was wearing a simple sweater and trousers. No crown, no formal robes. He looked like any other father who had just learned his son had nearly died. "Officer Mitchell," the king said. His voice was thick with emotion. James bowed immediately. "Your Majesty." "Please don't," the king said, raising his hand. "You don't need to bow. Not today." James straightened, unsure what to do with his hands. The queen was watching him. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling now. A small, grateful smile that made James's throat tighten. "Come here," the king said gently. James walked closer. His boots sounded too loud on the wooden floor. When he was a few feet away, the king reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved my son's life," the king said simply. "There are no words that can properly thank you for what you did." James started to say. "You threw yourself in front of a falling chandelier," the queen interrupted softly. "You could have been killed. You didn't hesitate. Not even for a second." James didn't know what to say. He looked at Prince George. The boy was watching him with those same wide blue eyes. "How is your arm?" the queen asked. "It's fine, Your Majesty. Just a small cut." 12 stitches is not a small cut," she replied. There was a firmness in her voice. A mother's voice. "You were injured protecting our son." The king gestured to a chair. "Please, sit with us." James hesitated. Guards didn't sit with royalty. But the king was waiting. So James sat down carefully on the edge of the chair, his back straight, his hands on his knees. "I've been looking at your file," the king said. 11 years of service. Decorated twice for bravery. Not a single complaint. Commander Williams says you're one of the finest officers he's ever worked with. James felt his face grow warm. "I'm honored, sir. Do you have family?" The queen asked gently. "A sister, Your Majesty?" "She lives in Manchester." "My parents passed away some years ago." The queen nodded with understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that." There was a moment of quiet. The fire crackled. Outside, The storm was finally beginning to ease. Thin streams of sunlight broke through the dark clouds. Prince George suddenly spoke. His voice was soft, but clear. "May I say something?" The king and queen looked at their son. The king nodded. "Of course." The boy turned to look directly at James. For a 10-year-old, he had remarkable composure. But James could see the emotion beneath it. The boy was still scared, still processing what had happened. "I've seen you in the corridor many times," Prince George said. "Every Tuesday and Thursday. You always say good afternoon. You always smile at me. Even though you're supposed to be serious." James felt his heart skip. He hadn't realized the boy had noticed. "Today, you didn't just smile," the prince continued. His voice began to shake slightly. "You saved me. I know it almost happened. I saw the chandelier. I heard Mrs. Patterson scream. I felt you grab me. And I know," he paused, swallowing hard, "I know that you could have been hurt, or worse." The queen reached over and took her son's hand. The king's jaw was clenched tight. Prince George stood up. He walked over to where James sat. And then, this young prince, this future king, did something no one expected. He reached out and hugged James. It wasn't a formal gesture. It wasn't for show. It was a genuine embrace. A child, thanking the man who saved his life. James felt tears prick his eyes. He carefully put his arms around the boy, mindful of his injured arm. "Thank you," Prince George whispered. "Thank you for saving me." James couldn't speak. If he tried, his voice would break. So he just held the boy a moment longer, then gently pulled back. The prince's eyes were wet with tears he was trying not to shed. "You're very brave, Your Highness," James managed to say. The boy shook his head. "No, you're the brave one." The queen stood and walked over. She placed her hand on James's uninjured arm. "We will never forget what you did today. Never." The king joined them. "We want to honor you properly. A ceremony, medal, whatever you need, it's yours." James looked at them. These were the most powerful people in Britain. They could give him anything. Money, land, a title. But as he looked at Prince George, still standing close to him, James realized something. He didn't want any of that. "With respect, Your Majesty," James said carefully, "I don't need a ceremony. I don't need a medal. I just need to know that he's safe. That's all I've ever wanted." The king studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine. "You're a good man, Officer Mitchell." "We insist on doing something," the queen said firmly. "Please let us." James thought about it. Then an idea came to him. "There's one thing," he said quietly.
"Name it,"
the king replied.
"Am I sister's daughter?"
"My niece. She's 8 years old. She loves art, drawing, painting, anything creative. But my sister can't afford proper art lessons. If there was any way," he trailed off, feeling suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. That's too much to ask." "Not at all," the queen said immediately. "What's her name?" "Emma, Your Majesty." The queen smiled. "Emma will have the finest art instruction available. We'll arrange everything. And her education when the time comes, university, everything." James felt his eyes burning again. "Your Majesty, I can't. You saved our son," the king said quietly. "You asked for nothing for yourself, only for your family. That tells us everything we need to know about who you are." Prince George tugged on James's sleeve. "Can I show you something?" James looked at the king and queen. They nodded. The boy led James across the room to a table near the window. On it was a sketchbook. Prince George opened it carefully. Inside were drawings. Pencil sketches of the castle, the gardens. People he knew. They were good. Really good. Better than James would have expected from a 10-year-old. "I like to draw too," the prince said. "When I'm nervous or sad, it helps me feel better." He turned to a blank page. Then he picked up a pencil and began to sketch. His hand moved quickly, confidently. James watched as a face began to take shape. Strong jawline, serious eyes, a uniform collar. It was him. Prince George was drawing James. The boy worked in silence for several minutes. The king and queen watched from across the room. No one spoke. The only sound was the pencil scratching against paper and the dying fire in the hearth. Finally, Prince George set down the pencil. "It's not perfect," he said, "but I wanted you to have it." He carefully tore the page from the sketchbook and handed it to James. The drawing was remarkable. The prince had captured not just James's features, but something deeper. There was kindness in the drawn face, strength. The eyes seemed to hold all the emotion of the day at the bottom. Prince George had written in neat handwriting to Officer James Mitchell, who saved my life. "I'll never forget this day. With gratitude, George." James held the paper carefully, as if it might dissolve. "Your Highness, this is— I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep it," the prince replied. "Please." "I will," James promised. "I'll keep it forever." The queen wiped her eyes. Even the king looked emotional. This moment, so simple and genuine, seemed to matter more than any formal ceremony ever could. Commander Williams appeared at the door. "I apologize for interrupting, Your Majesties, but there are reporters gathering outside. Word has spread about the incident. They're asking questions." The king's expression hardened. "Handle it. Tell them there was a minor accident. No injuries. That's all they need to know, of course, sir." The commander glanced at James and Officer Mitchell. "Officer Mitchell is to have the rest of the week off," the king said. "Paid leave, and he's to be moved to a different assignment when he returns. Something less physically demanding while his arm heals." "Sir, that's not necessary," James protested. "I can still work. It's not a punishment," the queen said gently. "It's gratitude. Please, let us do this." James nodded. He knew better than to argue further. Prince George walked over to his parents. "Can Officer Mitchell come back and visit? After his arm is better?" The queen looked surprised. Then she smiled. "Would you like that?" "Yes," the boy said firmly. "He's nice, and I'd like to show him more drawings." "If he wants to see them?" The king looked at James. "What do you say, Officer Mitchell? Would you be willing to visit from time to time? Unofficially. Just as a friend." James felt something warm spread through his chest. A royal guard being asked to be a friend to a prince. It was unheard of. It broke every rule of protocol. But the way Prince George was looking at him with hope in his eyes made the answer easy. "I would be honored, Your Highness." The prince smiled. It was the first real smile James had seen from him since the accident. It made everything worthwhile. The fear, the injury, all of it. The king extended his hand. James shook it, feeling the firm grip, the genuine warmth. Then the queen took his hand in both of hers. "You gave us back our son," she whispered. "We will never forget that." As James left the room, Prince George ran up to him one more time. "Officer Mitchell." James turned. "Yes, Your Highness. Thank you. For everything." The boy's voice was steady now, strong. "I promise I'll work hard on my art, so next time I can draw you even better." James smiled. "I look forward to seeing it." He walked back through the castle corridors, the drawing carefully folded in his pocket. His arm throbbed with each step, but he barely noticed. His mind was full of the last 2 hours. The terror, the relief, the unexpected kindness of a royal family who had shown him more humanity than he'd ever expected. Outside, the storm had completely cleared. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. James stood for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air. Other guards were gathered nearby, talking in hushed voices about what had happened. "Mitchell," one of them called out. "Is it true? Did you really save the prince?" James didn't answer immediately. He thought about how to respond. Finally, he said simply, "I did my job." But it had been more than that. So much more. That night, James sat in his small apartment. The drawing was now in a frame on his desk. He'd stopped at a shop on the way home, bought the best frame they had. The words at the bottom seemed to glow in the lamplight. "I'll never forget this day." Neither would James. Not for as long as he lived. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "Emma keeps asking about visiting the castle. She's obsessed with the princes and princesses. I keep telling her it's impossible." He typed back carefully. "Don't be so sure. I have a feeling we might be able to arrange something special." His sister sent back 3 question marks. James would explain everything later. For now, he just wanted to sit in the quiet, to let the day settle, to understand that his life had changed in ways he was only beginning to realize. 3 months passed. James's arm healed completely, leaving only a thin white scar. He'd been reassigned to the castle's north wing, a quieter post that gave him time to think, to process, to realize how close everything had come to tragedy. True to their word, King and Queen had arranged for Emma's art lessons. She now studied twice a week with a renowned instructor who usually only taught at prestigious academies. His sister called him every day, overwhelmed with gratitude, sometimes crying with joy at the opportunities opening up for her daughter. But what surprised James most was the friendship that had developed with Prince George. Every few weeks, a private invitation would arrive. Tea with the prince, a walk through the gardens, a quiet afternoon in the library. These meetings were never publicized. No photographers, no press releases. Just a boy and the man who had saved him, talking about art and life and all the small things that mattered, on a bright Tuesday in spring. James arrived at the castle for one of these visits. Prince George met him at the door, practically bouncing with excitement. "I have something to show you," the boy said, grabbing James's hand and pulling him down the corridor. They arrived at a large room James had never seen before. Inside, canvases covered the walls, paintings, dozens of them, all created by Prince George over the past 3 months. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that showed remarkable depth for someone so young. But in the center of the room, on a special easel, was a painting that made James stop breathing. It was the moment from that day. The chandelier falling. James reaching for the prince, Mrs. Patterson in the background, her hand over her mouth. The detail was stunning. The emotion was raw. "I needed to paint it," Prince George explained quietly. "My therapist said it would help. To get it out of my head and onto canvas." James walked closer. He could see every brushstroke. The fear in the painted James's eyes, the determination, the split-second choice to act. "Did it help?" James asked softly. The prince nodded.
"It did."
"Because now when I think about that day, I don't just remember being scared. I remember being saved. I remember that there are people in the world who would risk everything to protect someone else." The Queen entered the room. "He worked on that for weeks," she said. "He wouldn't let anyone see it until it was perfect." James looked at her. "He's incredibly talented." "He is. Thanks in part to the confidence you gave him. And to Emma." The Queen smiled. "Did you know they write to each other? Emma sends him drawings. He sends her paintings. They critique each other's work." James hadn't known. His 8-year-old niece was pen pals with the prince. The thought made him shake his head in wonder. Prince George walked over to a covered canvas in the corner. "I have one more thing. This one's for you. A thank you gift. For everything." He pulled off the cloth. Underneath was a portrait, but not of James. It was of Emma. Prince George had painted her from a photograph James had shown him months ago. She was in a garden, holding a paintbrush, smiling at something beyond the frame. The sunlight caught her hair. Her eyes sparkled with joy. It was beautiful. It captured her spirit perfectly. "Oh, I thought you might want it," the prince said. "For your apartment. So you always remember that good things came from that scary day." James felt his throat close up. "Your Highness, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep being my friend," Prince George replied simply. "Even when I'm older. Even when things change. Because that day didn't just save my life. It taught me something important." "What's that?" James asked. "That titles and crowns don't matter as much as kindness. That a real hero is someone who acts without thinking about themselves. And that sometimes the people who protect us become the people we love." The Queen was crying now. She didn't try to hide it. James felt his own eyes burning. The king appeared in the doorway. I thought I might find you all here. He walked over to James. Officer Mitchell, we've been discussing something as a family. We'd like to make you George's personal protection officer. When he travels, when he attends events, we trust you with his life. More importantly, he trusts you. James looked at Prince George. The boy was nodding eagerly. Please say yes, the prince said. I feel safer when you're there. How could he refuse? This child who had shown him more grace and gratitude than he'd ever expected, this family who had welcomed him into their private world, this unexpected friendship that had become one of the most important things in his life. Yes, James said. I would be honored. Prince George hugged him. The Queen wiped her eyes. The King smiled with approval. And in that moment, James understood something profound. He hadn't just saved a prince that day. He'd found a purpose, a connection, a reminder that sometimes one single action, one moment of courage, can change everything. Years later, James would still keep the first drawing Prince George gave him, the one from that terrible, beautiful day, and next to it, the painting of Emma in the garden. Both carefully framed, both treasured because they weren't just pictures. They were proof that heroism isn't about seeking glory. It's about doing what's right when it matters most. And proof that sometimes, in the space between danger and safety, between fear and relief, real friendships are born. The kind that last a lifetime. The kind you never forget.